to all the presentations, there's a core theme there. And maybe that's because my brain is like obsessed with value props, which those of you who know me, obsessed would be a light way of saying it. But if I looked at what Trish said, one of the things that Trish said was, we're boring the crap out of our buyers. And we are. Absolutely. Karen has talked about the third plank being having the right message. And that's not easy to figure out at all. My storytelling plus the goal, and I hope that goal is the buyer's goal and not your own goal. That's always a big disconnect right there. And then Sherry, this whole idea of linking, which I think is really, really huge. So what it comes down to at the end of the day is, do we have a value prop that says anything that's meaningful to your buyer, or do we have a value prop that's all product and service and basically sucks? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So the first thing I have to do is I have to say, I am Lisa Dennis. I was a product manager that wrote some of the worst value props known to man in the early part of my career. Why? Nobody taught me how to do it. Nobody taught me how to do it. There's very little training around that. You wing it, you say what you have to say about your own product or service, or you copy something that somebody else did. That's the way it works, okay? So that's part of the problem. I hope I'm holding this the right way. Is that the right way? Cool. So what I want to do is just quickly go through, how do I diagnose if my message is out of whack? Because that's the first thing, right? And I want to kind of look at a before and after of a real example, okay? Product focused, and then how do I, what I call flip the mirror? So we'll talk a little bit about that. How do I craft each component, and then what do I get afterwards? What does a buyer-focused message look like? And then some key points to remember. First of all, we got to get our arms around what's a really good definition, because there's a lot of really different definitions about value props, and this is mine. And it's got a key component to it that I think a lot of the way we think about value props is off. My definition is it should be a customer or buyer-focused description of value that demonstrates your knowledge about the customer's experience or challenge, and then your specific offer, and I'll talk more about that to address it, and then what differentiates your offer from any other. Now that makes perfect sense, except it is absolutely brutal to get there. Because most of our value props demonstrate our knowledge about our own product or service. Because that's what we know best. And that's what we get paid, supposedly, to talk about, but the buyers really obviously don't care. So if we look at it that way, here's one of the things that I think you should do to start, is to diagnose the state of your message. Do you have multiple stories or messages that are being talked about in your marketing and with your salespeople? Very rarely is there one story. There's lots of them. Oh, that one didn't work. So I'm 50% sales, 50% marketing, which makes me a mutant human being. And that message didn't work, don't worry about it, I got another one. I'll make one up. I'll do what I have to do, right? And that happens all the time. One of the things I often ask some of the companies I work with is, let's do a value prop test. Let's ask 10 people in your company, all customer facing, what's the value prop? Let's collect them up, and then let's put them together and see what they look like. And it's absolutely frightening. Because some of them aren't even about the same thing. They're like, everybody's all over the map. So that's a thing you want to check. How does the message, the value prop message, talk about value? Right? Because we were in this sort of feature benefit world, and most benefits I find that are embedded in value props are actually thinly disguised features. Really, are we talking about value? And value is not about what we think is valuable, it's what they think is valuable. So that's huge. You want to talk about that. Is it focused on features or outcomes? We get so wrapped around the axle about our features that we automatically assume they're going to have value and that your buyers are going to connect the dots quickly. And actually, they don't. They don't need you to tell them their features. You've got tons of content out on the web. They can go find that without you. So if you're going to use a value prop for a conversation, don't waste airtime on features that they don't need you to figure out. What they need from you is a conversation and the components of value from their point of view. Here's my favorite. Do you have one value prop that fits just about everything? I love it when it says, we need a corporate value prop. Why? Why do you need that? Who would ever use it? Who would care about it? How many of us have a closet full of one-size-fits-all clothing? Okay? how much of that actually fits you? Thank you, sir, for being so blunt. There you go. He's like, I have it. There's a lot of women in here who have it who don't want to admit it. But anyway, so yeah, one size fits all fits no one, right? And that's a problem. And then the last piece. I rarely see a value prop that actually, to back it up, has a set of well-defined value drivers, which I define as top 3 to 5 value points that are in the head of your buyer as they are looking to make a decision. The kind of value points they use to consider, does this make sense for me? Quantifying each one of them in a real way, and then having objective third-party proof to back it up. I rarely, if ever, see a value prop with that piece attached automatically. So we don't really, it's not bulletproof. So those are the key questions. I look at my value prop, whether it's for a specific solution or product or offer, and go through this and go, how much of this do I actually have? That'll give you a sense of the state of the value prop that you have, okay? And the challenge is that what we really want to do is we want to clearly pull from the buyer's side, right? Because if you don't put the value piece in, then you're leaving it up to them to decide. You're leaving it up to them to connect the dots of your offering to their needs, right? And so that value piece that's missing, they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to guess. So when they started having to compare features and some of the weak benefits you have with other features and benefits, they're pretty much going to grab onto one thing and move, and maybe that's you and maybe it's not. Whereas from a value point of view, it actually gives you something to actually hook them in. Because that's coming from inside of them. That's kind of how their thought process is already working. So that's a really huge thing about integration of the message. So what most people don't know, because none of us have had training about value props, is that there's actually 3 types. Okay? First one is what I call the me value prop. And you guessed it. It's all about my product. It's all about my own stuff, right? It's very focused on what I have. So it includes all the benefits or all the features. It asks a very marketing and sales 101 question. Why should I buy your product or your service? In this day and age, that is the lamest question ever, okay? Because we need to go further than that. All you really need for that kind of value prop is you need to know enough about your own offering. The problem with it is that the benefits we put in there, we're assuming the buyer knows. And we don't necessarily know as well, right? And it's really good for an awareness piece of the buyer journey, but the reality is it's not enough. I think about 85% of the value props I see, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds, are this type. Why? It's the easiest one to do. And value prop development is not easy, right? It's hellacious, okay? But of all of the 3 types, that's the easiest because all I have to know is my own stuff, right? And then I kind of do some brainstorming and hopefully I've got more information around benefits. The middle one is what I call the us versus them value prop, which is really looking at alternatives. So it's a head-to-head review with a key competitor or competitors. And really what you're doing is you're kind of pitting, like, they have this, but we have that. Or we have this and they don't have that. And while that's a good thing in that at least you're looking outside the window of your own company and your own offer, you're still getting into a feature and benefit war with some of your competitors. And the buyer doesn't always get pulled into that. Because we're making assumptions of, because I don't have this, and that vendor does, then the buyer's going to go there. So we're making assumptions about what they really care about. And then the third one, and really what you need there is kind of product and competitor knowledge, and you need some deep competitor knowledge. Because if you're going to do it right, you have to understand the value of what they're offering versus the value of what you're offering, instead of, I got this feature and you don't. Or I have this differentiator and you don't. What's really interesting in all of these types is when I do a competitive review of one value prop against the other, 9 times out of 10, they're all aping the same stuff. It's really hard to get anything that's truly unique. And then there's the third one, which is what I call the it's about you value prop. It's buyer focus. I have to know not only my own product or service, I got to know a lot about the competitors, and I actually have to know some stuff about the buyers, like a lot. Like I need to have some conversations with them. I need to understand what they're looking for, because if the definition is that a good value prop is about you're demonstrating your knowledge about their situation or goal or challenge, then it kind of behooves you to go find that out. You can't do it without it. So that one engages a buyer differently because you're actually leading with them. I don't know about you, but I could take any one of you out to lunch, and if you forgot everything your mother ever taught you about being polite and charming, and I asked you, would you like to talk about me, or would you like to talk about you? In your heart of hearts, you want to talk, he's nodding and goes, I want to talk about me, right? Because you're way more interesting than I am, okay? Every buyer that you deal with feels that way, right? So that's the deal. And with the buyer-focused one, you have a lot more opportunity to tune your message depending on what part of the buyer journey you're in. And I think that makes it the most powerful of the three. So this is a real example of a real customer. It's actually one of the case studies that I have in the book. And so let me just give you a quick and dirty. And this is from the Wayback Machine, their website from then. They were a 10-year-old startup. Okay, right out of there, we get a problem. That tells you right out of the gate, oops, there is a problem here, okay? They had a marketing platform. They were selling to marketing managers and PR agencies. It was software technology. They, at the time, non-technical audience, and they were selling a product with technical features. And they had flat growth for the last 5 years, okay? And so that was a huge problem. So they led, this is their home page, starting to talk about their dashboard. Now, if I'm going to market for a dashboard, that would be really fabulous. But I don't even know what they do, and I'm already talking about a dashboard, and it's on the front page. That's a problem. And then they started pushing, here's our partners, here's our customers, here's all this stuff. There's no message here, which is kind of a problem, right? So before they've even made a case, they're going, oh, look at us, look at all these cool people that we hang out with. Well, I don't know if I care about who you hang out with yet. You know, so that was a problem. Couldn't figure out who this was addressed to. Are they selling to IT? Are they selling to marketing? Are they selling to PR? Are they selling to who? Nobody knows. And all of their messaging, when you get deeper, was more focused on IT buyers, except that IT wasn't the one who was making the decision. So that was a challenge. There was no aspect of why would I even be here longer than 4 seconds, right? Not clear what the problem or need was. And that's the opening message. That's the first thing they look at. So the opportunity to hook me is pretty much gone at that point, right? Then you get a little bit deeper, and you get into their product message. See all these little blocks here? These little blocks? Every one of those blocks is them mentioning themselves by name. So in this kind of value prop of what they are, what they offer, they mentioned themselves 16 times. Okay, that's being a little self-involved, don't you think? So that was a problem right out of the gate. It's like, oh my God. So the best way and the first thing you really need to do to fix is you're going to flip the mirror. So I look at a value prop. Think about this metaphorically. A value proposition is a mirror. It's a mirror. So when your buyer looks in the mirror, who do they want to see? They do not want to see your face, no matter how charming or wonderful or handsome or cool you are. They don't want to see you. They want to see themselves. And so you've got to think about that. That's the quick and dirty test. Look at the value prop of whatever it is that you're responsible for marketing and selling and go, whose face is in here, right? Because 9 times out of 10, and it makes me a living, so I shouldn't complain, but it's usually your face and not the buyer's, and that's a problem, right? So this is the spot where you really want to look at how do we put the buyer need actually in the value prop statement. And most value props start with the name of your company. Dead giveaway, this is about us and it's not about you. So that's a thing, that's a problem, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to really look at who's my audience. I always go back to who's my audience, who are they, personas are great, get really in depth, who are they, what do they care about, what are they challenged with, and then I actually pull that language and hopefully it came out of the mouth of them. I always do customer interviews or buyer interviews. I use a handful of customers that are madly in love with what we do. I have some that we're keeping an eye on and they're using us, but We're not sure how steady they are. And then I always ask for, can I talk to a handful of your customers who left? Only the really brave people do that, but it tells you a lot. And then you pull that language, right? So you really want to think about what are some of the things. So they were focusing on corporate marketing, and they were talking about tech stuff at the time when it didn't matter. And so their target audience, the marketers, wanted to know, what are our customers thinking? The software platform, this is back when social media was really happening and new, and you couldn't really measure it at all. How do I find out what everyone's saying about us? It was before Hootsuite and things like that, right? So it's like, holy moly, we can't possibly track all this by ourselves, and they were trying to. Well, they want to know what their customers are thinking. They want to know what content's being created about their brand by other people outside of our company. Are they saying good things or bad things? That's really scary. That was a big fear thing. The tools that they had for traditional media, completely ineffective. They didn't know what to do next. And they were trying to push social media, but they were trying to also prove to their own senior execs, this is really valuable, we really should be doing it. But, oh, by the way, we can't measure any of it. But it's still really valuable and it's really cool. Which wasn't playing. They weren't getting budget. Corporate reputation was at risk, and they had no standard or automated way to collect all these mentions. Those were their problems. This organization's messaging didn't address a single one of those, because they kept talking about the features of the platform. Okay? So that was an issue. So the first thing we had to do is we had to actually add a buyer objective statement to the front end of the value prop. People say to me, shouldn't our value prop be like 1 line or 2 lines or maybe 3? Like, it's too long. It's not an elevator pitch. A value prop is not an elevator pitch. Now, a value prop is not a tagline. You pull those out of a good value prop, but they're not the same thing. You need enough messaging, a solid value prop that you can pull sales messaging and marketing messaging and all kinds of topics and themes. But if you have a 2-line value prop, how are you going to do that? You're going to start making it up. And your salespeople are going to make it up. And this person over in corporate marketing is going to do a story, and this one over here in industry marketing is going to do another story, and it gets all over the map. So let's build in, using a language that you got from the conversations you had with your buyers, and create a statement up front about them. You don't even get to talk about your offering in here. You really shouldn't. So that the first thing they see when they look at it or hear it is all about them. So you add, fix number 1 is you incorporate the buyer into the mix up front. Okay? Then you get to the offer statement. Okay? And this was their old one. And I'm not even going to read it, but look how big it is. And oh yes, it started with their name. There it is. And the second paragraph started with their name. And they talked about their information extraction technology. Like, who cares, right? I really didn't. So it was really too long, lots of stuff, talking about the tech. Horrible, right? And this is all they had. This is what they led with. So let's get rid of that, and let's pull it in. And the big part of attaching the buyer objective to your offer statement is the offer statement shouldn't be everything, right? It shouldn't be everything that you have or you know or you want to say about your offer, because it may not be relevant. I had a really bad habit as a kid, like running out into the neighborhood and telling everybody who would listen to me, like the fights that my parents had, and the fact that my sister threw up on the cat, and all this good stuff. I wanted everyone in the neighborhood to know, right? Because they would listen, and I got attention. And my mother got a phone call from one of the neighborhood mothers and said, "Oh, Marie, I'm so sorry to hear that you're getting divorced," except my parents didn't know that. I kind of extrapolated on the story. And so after I was let out of house arrest at the age of 18, my mother said to me, "Here's the deal. You don't have to tell everything you know. You don't. Not everyone's interested, and it's not relevant." And that is a #1 problem with offer statements that I see in value props, is we try to shove in every single thing. So they get super bloated, super generic, because we don't want to leave anything out, and it becomes less and less relevant to your buyer. So if you have a buyer objective statement that's really tuned in, their language they really care about, then the only part you get to talk about in your offer statement is just those pieces they care about, which may not be the 27 other features we have of our platform that they don't care about. Okay? They'll figure that stuff, and we'll tell them later after they buy it. All we want to do is net it out to something tighter. So we worked on this. This offer statement alone, the buyer statement took quite a bit. The offer statement, we went through 8 versions of it. And most of it was stripping stuff out that they wanted to shove in there. It wanted to be something that we could pull a good pitch, that we could pull a new tagline, that we could actually have be very, very relevant and tight, and it's in language that actually mattered to the audience. So we did that. And then the hardest part, number 4, is the differentiators. I think that's the hardest part of any value prop, because what's truly differentiating is hard, right? And a lot of times people want to hook it on a feature. Well, TikTok, if you have a feature that nobody has, somebody's right behind you. So you're not going to have it for very long. So that's the thing. The differentiator has to be about value, not about a feature, right? So we kind of nailed down 2 value props, 2 differentiators that we can actually prove and back up. We started with 12 differentiating points. 12. So then I said, well, wait a minute, let's look at the 9 competitors' messaging that I reviewed. I do a messaging scan. 7 out of the 10 companies, including my client, claimed exactly the same differentiators. Liar, liar, pants on fire, that's not even close. So getting to this part's really hard, because you're going to pull a lot of stuff up. We got 2, we can back them up with proof. Very hard to get people to be that. If you've got 1 or 2 that you can back up, you're lucky, right? And that's the real kind of thing you want to move in. So then, now you have your buyer objective statement that's about them and their language to get them to take a step forward. You have an offer statement that's just the pieces that matter to that. And you've got 1 or 2 really provable differentiators. Are we done? No. Okay? Here's really the secret sauce, from my point of view, that really matters, which is, if I want to extend this into sales messaging and conversations, I need more than that. So then we net out to what these value drivers, right? Key points of value. If I'm a marketing person, right, who's responsible for trying to prove ROI to my boss about us spending more money on social media and really getting and measuring what we really have, then what do I really care about in the offerings that I look at? Well, the data better be really immediate. Like, I don't want to know, like, this happened yesterday, right? I want to know real-time immediacy of data was huge. That was big. I don't want a bunch of crap that comes up from your system that isn't even relevant to the topic at hand. And let's just think about all the mentions that are out there, and language itself is complex. So relevance is, and then can we prove it? What proof is offered that this mention is relevant and real and worth our time and can be included in the metrics that we pull on the media that we're reporting out? So those happen to be, they had 5. These are just 3. And then we quantified it. So you quantify a value driver with some data, right? Do you have survey data? Do you have statistical data from a relevant industry expert or industry organization? How do I back up that value driver really is important and real, right? So the quantification piece is also a test. If I can't quantify my value driver, chances are it's pretty weak, right? So boom, I gotta pull it out. And then I back it up one more time with proof. Third-party objective proof. Customer testimonial, partner testimonial, industry subject matter expert, awards, anything that backs up that value driver and put it up. And you wanna make sure that you serve it up so that the customer testimonies, case studies, and data are served up with your value prop. So when I put something out, I put out what's called a value proposition platform. So it's bigger than just that one little 3-line statement, right? Here's the key targets, right? Here are the key buyer needs, challenges, and whatever. Here's the buyer objective statement. Here's our offer statement. Here's the differentiators. Here's the value drivers, quantification, and proof. And then I attach the proof to it. So when I take this to my corporate marketing group, or I take this to my agency, or I take this to my salespeople, I have all the pieces. So they don't have to make any of it up. And then I can start to pull themes, like these value drivers. Let me just go back one. Each one of those value drivers becomes a topic area that I can pull out all kinds of different content and expand on, right? And I've got some of the proof points that I need to show that it works. So that's kind of an important way to pull that up. Really important. The fix number 7 is, I gotta make sure that I'm not trying to do this one-size-fits-all kind of value prop. That's the really big thing, right? So I suggest build a foundational value prop. So I'll talk to an organization and say, well, we're in 5 verticals. Well, which is the 1 or 2 that you make the lion's share of your revenue? Let's go attack those first. Usually it's 1, to be quite honest, right? Go build that one. Then you can go back and look at, okay, now let's look at the other verticals or the other market segments. What's different about the buyers? Are there needs or challenges? Do they talk about it differently? We just have to tweak the buyer objective set of needs in the buyer objective statement. The offer statement, maybe it's a minimal tweak, but it's probably going to be pretty solid. And then the differentiators, maybe 1 or 2. Is there one that's more important than the other? Focus on that. Your drivers, some of those will apply, and you'll have to add some new ones and replace, depending upon who you're aiming at. So the good news is, you don't ever start with once you do a foundational value prop this way, you never start with a blank page again. Because you've got the base, and now you're going to look at where do I pivot depending on who and what I'm aiming at, which really helps towards much more consistent messaging, which is a big problem because a lot of messaging is wildly inconsistent. So that's a problem. Okay? So it gets really streamlined and simple. So we went from that initial version to this. So we had a good solid message that talked about what the issues were. We really focused on some of the key value drivers right up front. We actually did an area, looking at influence is a very different kind of thing at the time that this was done. It gave them a whole thought leadership platform to work from. Actually made a huge, huge, huge difference. And so when we get into the deeper part of the value prop, they started talking about things that actually mattered, and so monitoring, measuring, and discovering for their audiences was really huge. Speaking the buyer language, you want to get the technical piece of the platform deeper in, later in on the sales cycle. So those kinds of assets, conversational and content assets, still appropriate, still needed, but not in the front end of your beginning to go after these prospects. So it starts to build the front end stuff that most of our salespeople are struggling with. Because most of the time, all they really have is that product or service related stuff. So that's kind of an issue, a way to figure it. And so then they actually went way beyond in terms of really becoming an expert on this particular topic and going forward. The really interesting piece of it is, 1.5 years into launching this, and we launched the messaging to the entire company, and we did a messaging training for the sales force, which usually doesn't happen. You do the value prop, you embed it, you throw it over the fence, and we kind of worked it. And within 1.5 years, remember, 10-year startup, founding team still running it, right? They get approached by a much bigger player in the space who told them, we didn't even know you guys were here. Like for 10 years, we didn't even know you were here, and that they were told this value prop floated up, and it's exactly plugging a hole in our arsenal that we don't have. And so they got bought, which was a beautiful thing. The founders are all on an island somewhere now, right? So value prop has lots of different ways of looking at it, but their revenue increased. They started really getting very successful. It was an amazing thing, and it was, on the one hand, a simple fix. On the other, it's flipping the mirror. That makes a huge, huge difference. So if I had to sum it up, right? Add the buyer from the start. Embed the buyer in the value prop statement. Embed them, right? Don't share everything about your offer, right? Don't tell everything you know, just what matters, depending upon what you've honed in are the needs of the buyer. Be relevant. I did some buyer research on decision makers, particularly around technology with IDG Connect. The #1 complaint decision makers have with the value props they evaluate is the lack of relevance. #1 complaint. The most relevant, we asked, what are the most relevant, if you had to give a percentage, what's the highest or lowest level of relevance that your value props that you evaluate are? Highest was 71%. So that left a huge gap at the top. Lowest was around 30. That's really broad. So if you can get above that sort of 71% and be way more relevant, by definition, that makes you more differentiated. Because most of your competitors are saying the same old thing. So I think that's a bigger thing. If you can't prove it, don't say it. If you can't back it up, if you can't quantify it, if you don't have credible third-party proof, I don't care how cool it is. It's not credible and your buyers know it. And then keep it simple language, buyer-focused language. I think is really important. So if I had to, so just to run through the fixes, fix number 1, go get your arms around the buyer needs in their language. Number 2, turn that into a buyer objective statement and embed it in the front end of your value prop. Don't obsess over this thing has to be like one sentence. Okay? It's not a pitch. It's not an elevator pitch. It's not a tagline. Those are things you pull out afterwards. I need enough meat to work with. Make sure your company offers specific, 1 or 2 true, provable differentiators. Figure out your value drivers. That's an interesting exercise to do. Quantify them, objective third-party proof, and now pull and extend. So now I have my themes. I have all of the core pieces because it's very modular, and that allows me to pull my messaging through the content and through the sales conversations. You can go even further and pull some of this stuff and expand it in on a playbook kind of thing for sales. It makes that whole piece a whole lot easier.